People should not be defined by their ADHD. You may have ADHD, but you have many other dimensions that could be enhancing your life. The goal for ADHD treatment is to try to figure out how you can do things in a way that works for you so that you remain connected to the people around you, the world around you, and able to function well. So ADHD doesn't mean I can't do it. It means I got to figure out how to do it my way.
Hi, it's Kate from ADHDkidscanthrive.com. Before we start, I want to address the fact that I know how overwhelming it can feel to parent a child with ADHD. The questions, the challenges, the desires to give your child the best possible chance to thrive is a lot to carry for parents. That's why I want to share my journey with you through my book, How We Roll: A Parent's Journey on Raising a Child with ADHD. I've had the privilege of helping many parents like you navigate the journey of raising a child with ADHD. We've worked together to create brighter paths. All my experiences, practical tips, heartfelt insights are narrowed down into this book. To help you get started, I've made the first 3 chapters of the book available to you for free. You can check out through the link in the show notes below. Hi, it's Kate Brownfield from ADHDkidscanthrive.com. Thank you for being here and thank you for all your support. I am your host of the ADHD Kids Can Thrive podcast. I'm an ADHD parent coach, author, and parent. If you'd like to stay in touch or see what I'm up to, you can always visit ADHDkidscanthrive.com. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Dr. Sarah Cheyette, a pediatric neurologist in the San Francisco Bay Area. She's a doctor who specializes in brains, including ADHD. She is the author of the first ever book on ADHD for the American Academy of Neurology, which will be released later in 2025. It's always a pleasure to have her join us today to improve our overall understanding of what ADHD is. Please enjoy our conversation. Hi, Sarah. Thank you for being here. I'm really looking forward to talking to you.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so I have you back on the podcast because you let me know that you have written a new book. It's for the American Academy of Neurology about ADHD.
That's correct. And the book is about living with ADHD. The American Academy of Neurology has done a series of books like Living with Parkinson's or Living with Migraines. This is their first ever book about ADHD, and it's about living with ADHD.
Okay, interesting. And is this for the medical community or is this for parents in the medical community?
We hope that this book will be useful for everybody who is associated with the ADHDer. We hope it will be useful for the ADHDer, him or herself. We aimed it not just towards parents of kids, but also the adults involved as well, because as you know, Kate, ADHD is something that runs in families. So hopefully, this is something that an ADHDer of any age would be helped by, and also coaches, parents, loved ones, care partners is what we call them in the book. So some people are affected.
Okay, and is the book out and where do you get it?
It will be out this summer in July or August. I'll put a link up on my website and it should be available wherever books are sold.
Okay, so this leads me to this question. Does the medical community, if you don't have ADHD or you're not directly diagnosing parents, do you have a hard time? Does the medical community may have a hard time truly understanding what ADHD is and how that's affecting a person?
I really think there is a lot of misinformation out there on ADHD. And frankly, that's how some even physicians would get their information on ADHD. Like every neuropsychiatric type of issue like anxiety or depression, it's a fairly invisible thing in terms of we can't do any tests. Like, an
Right.
orthopedist could do the x-ray and say, look, here's your fracture. And we don't have that at this point in time. And so that opens up the door to a lot of, well, this is what it is, or, well, this is what it is. And, it's something that a lot of doctors haven't been trained in and are not necessarily comfortable with.
Yeah. Okay. So will this book help them in their understanding of diagnoses?
We aim to present the information in kind of a clear and basic, this is what it is, and not a threatening way, not you have this horrible disorder type of thing, but hey, here are some of the issues you may be facing, and here's what to do about them, because there's a lot that can be done about ADHD.
Right. Okay, so I wanted to, you're a pediatric neurologist, correct? So for our listeners, it's always good to understand as a regular person, what makes a pediatric neurologist different from other
We're
doctors?
superheroes. Okay. So I was trained as a pediatric neurologist, which means I'm looking at disorders of the brain and nervous system. And so traditionally, that's been headaches and seizures and autism and developmental delays. But I came into ADHD care because, I was seeing a lot of people with bad headaches. And a cause for those headaches seemed to be underlying stress in many people. And as a cause of the underlying stress, I learned about ADHD and learned to ask about it. So sometimes treating people's ADHD was the only way I could help them with their headaches. And from there, I grew to treat a lot of people with ADHD because there's a lot of people out there with ADHD. And, as the kids that I was treating grew older, they became college students with ADHD. And their parents sort of took a look and said, oh, that's me too. And I started dealing with the parents. So it's the type of thing where many pediatric neurologists do not go into ADHD treatment, but I think it's important.
Yeah. Okay. So if you had a child who you suspected ADHD, would you recommend that they seek out a pediatric neurologist? What if they wanted a proper diagnosis, like really figure out what's going on with their child?
Well, Kate, we do talk about this in the book. It's hard to know even where to go to. Do you go to a doctor? Do you go to a psychologist? Who do you go to get a diagnosis of ADHD? It's not super clear for a lot of people.
Right.
I usually recommend people start with their primary care doctors. And I do think actually a lot of ADHD care will be more and more moving towards primary care because there's not a lot of other people out there who are doing it. But start with your primary care doctor and ask who in your area is the best person to go to. It may very well be a psychiatrist because they have traditionally been doing ADHD. Although there are psychiatrists out there who don't treat ADHD. It could be a pediatric neurologist. It could be going to a psychologist for diagnosis. They can't take care of medications for you, but they may be the ones who do the diagnosis. So, and there's a variety of different kinds of psychologists out there. So I would say start by asking your primary care doctor who in your area is the right person for you to go to.
Yeah. Okay. That's good advice. Okay, so let's kind of get into the book, like a highlight. I wanted to do highlights with you of this book that's coming, so everybody's motivated to go get the book this summer of 2025.
Oh, you're so sweet.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just talk about what is the definition of ADHD in kids?
Well, what I would say is the best concept of ADHD. The definition has been changing over time, and it will change over time. So let's talk about the concept. Everyone focuses sometimes, right? And everybody's not focused sometimes. Simply put, your brain, when your brain is in the not focused state way too much of the time, that's essentially what ADHD is. It doesn't mean you can't ever concentrate. It just means that too much of the time, your brain is in a not focused state. Now, what's a focused state and what's a non-focused state? Focused means that your brain is able to prioritize one thing over all the other things. So like right now, Kate, I'm 100% focused on you. But if I wasn't focused on you, I might be thinking about you. And then, like, I got to go grocery shopping. And, like, what am I going to make for dinner? And is it going to rain again today? And blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's a million things I could be thinking of right now. When I'm focused, my brain has like one thing. If you think of your brain as a table, your brain has one thing on the top of the table and everything else put away in the drawers, somewhere else under the table. So your brain can focus on just one thing and stick with it and finish it. And that feels good. So you want to focus some more. And so it leads to a positive feedback cycle. When you're in a not focused state, you've got 20 different things all over your mental table. Everything's kind of the same priority for your brain. So your brain goes from one thing to the other thing, to the other thing, to the other thing. You're getting distracted, tend to make more mistakes that way. This does not feel good and makes it harder for you to focus again. So the point is, everyone is in the focused state sometimes, everyone's in the not focused state. But if your brain has a tendency to be in the not focused state way too much of the time, that's the concept of ADHD.
Okay. And that's when, if you were seeing this in your child.
Yes.
So if you're looking at school or something, so if your child's having a hard time getting into that focused state in school and kind of hanging out there, those are flags, right?
Yeah. And, how do you know that? Because like you can't get into your child's brain. If your child is not learning properly, well, ADHD is one explanation for that. If they're not paying attention, it's sure harder to learn. If they're not finishing things, it's harder to, get good grades. If they lose things a lot, some kids are obviously hyperactive, like bouncing off the walls, hyperactive. Some kids are more subtly hyperactive, so chatty might be,
yeah.
right?
Okay. Yeah.
So there are some signs that would be outward signs, but you also want to remember that there could be other explanations for all of the things that I just said. It doesn't have to be ADHD causing those, but that is a way ADHD could show up. So for example, if people are having a hard time paying attention, one explanation for that could be that they're too tired. They're not getting enough sleep. An alternative explanation could be that they're stressed out. They, are too upset, anxious, sad, whatever, fill in the bad word to concentrate. So, you want to take those outward signs and then kind of delve deeper into what's the cause.
Yeah. Okay. And just listening to you too, you can see how like screen time is playing into all of this you're talking, right? And as a parent, you have to be kind of more of a detective about, is screen time hijacking your attention versus having like ADHD, a true neurological disorder, right?
Right.
Kind of navigating that.
Except for, screen time can make your true neurological disorder even worse. And it could worsen everybody's focus, even if they're not at ADHD level areas of problems. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Too much screen time is not good for your brain. We can see that on certain types of scans that show us that even after just a week or two of screen time, your brain changes how it works. And I do worry about that because, like it or not, screen time is here to stay. Right. I think one way that, how like if you go on a vacation, it takes you a few days to kind of unplug and you're not checking your email every 10 minutes and all that stuff, then you can relax and you feel good. And part of that is unplugging from screen time and doing things that are kind of at the rate of the real world. In screen time, we enter this artificial world where everything is kind of faster and amped up. And you can also swipe away something that's not to your liking. Those things don't build attention, right? And then you go to something, our brains are programmed to work at the rate of the real world. And, if you can kind of retune your brain for that, playing chess, going for a walk, getting some exercise, gardening, ceramics, I mean, whatever, those are things that make us feel good because they are at the right pace for our brains.
So do you think, is ADHD on the rise for more environmental reasons than anything?
It's definitely on the rise, and there are probably a lot of reasons that contribute. It's hard to separate how much is sort of recognition of maybe more milder areas of ADHD from, our screen time and other things. Um, you know, when ADHD was first diagnosed, it was only sort of diagnosed for hyperactive little boys, right? And
Yeah.
now our concept has broadened so that people who are inattentive became part of the ADHD family. People who are not flunking out of stuff, who might be successful, but at a cost because of their ADHD, we're recognizing that better and better.
Yeah.
So part of it may be increased diagnosis, but I think that plugging into a screen 8 hours a day is also contributory.
So the future is going to get interesting.
Isn't it all?
Yeah, and we're sticking to ADHD, but also I heard autism rates are also on the rise too.
Yeah.
So both of those.
Yeah. They go hand in hand genetically, but I think the same aspects are also true in terms of increased diagnosis, particularly on the milder areas. So, we used to not diagnose autism unless it was a 2-year-old not talking, bang your head against on the wall, screaming, blah, blah, blah kid. Now the concept of autism is changing and we're including more people. So, how much is our society, our pollution, the plastic in the water, whatever, versus how much is increased diagnosis? I think people are trying to figure that out.
Yeah. Okay. So in the meantime, as parents, we just do the best that we can for the child that's presented in front of us.
So these diagnoses are going to change over time. They have changed over time. They will change over time. So I always advise people not to get too hung up on the label, but let's, roll up our sleeves and try to help this person. What can we help make their life better?
Yeah, that's wonderful advice.
Thank you. I mean, I really
That's
need
really
it.
what it's about. Yeah.
What it's about is I'm trying to get somebody from point A to point B. I don't need to label point A, but I do need to know how best to get them to point B.
Yeah. Yeah. And live a good life. Okay. So for your book, I wanted to just I haven't seen it. I haven't read it. If you could give us some highlights about what parents could expect from this book and just give us some key insights into it.
So this particular book is meant to kind of replicate and enhance what you would get if you went to see a doctor for ADHD. So, we talk about issues about the diagnosis of ADHD. How do you get diagnosed? Who diagnoses you? You need a bunch of tests, which could be expensive, like, neuropsych testing where they test your IQ and other things. What is needed? And we talk about, behavioral strategies that you can do that would help. The importance of sleep, the importance of exercise, working with coaches or therapists is also highlighted. And we also talk about, what ADHD could look like. Maybe this isn't ADHD for you. Maybe it's anxiety. Maybe it's depression. Maybe it's something else. And finally, we do talk about medications for ADHD as well, so that you have a grounding in what these things are, how they work, and, what side effects you might experience.
Yeah. Okay. Do you get into the emotional dysregulation piece?
Yes, emotional dysregulation is a huge part of ADHD. Someday it might be part of the diagnostic criteria. It's that common. Who knows? But, when you are in an emotional state, your brain cannot physically concentrate. Like we've seen that in ADHDers, not ADHDers, our brains are all hooked up in that regard in the same way.
Right.
When you're very upset, you can't concentrate.
That's right, right. And so if you're operating as an ADHD kid, right, and you're always kind of feeling upset or excited or whatever, it's very hard to
and
keep your attention on what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, when you have a hard time focusing, it leads to you being more stressed out and upset.
Yeah.
And when you're more stressed out and upset, you have a harder time focusing. So you are in a negative feedback loop right there. And one important part of my job is trying to figure out, what do we treat? Do we treat the focus first and see if your emotional piece gets better? Do we treat the emotional piece and see if your focus gets better?
Okay. And do you go into oppositional defiance?
I'll go into that in the book very much, but that probably would have been a good idea. But, if you have a negative mind frame for whatever reason, either you're born saying no all the time, or if you have that because of past negative experiences where you feel, like you can't do things as well as other people, that tends to make you want to say no to doing things. So there's a whole lot of factors that could result in a poor attention for doing things.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have any other insights you want to share with us?
I would say that people should not be defined by their ADHD. You may have ADHD, but you have many other dimensions that could be enhancing your life. So I think the goal for ADHD treatment is to try to figure out how you can do things in a way that works for you so that you remain connected to the people around you, the world around you, and able to function well. So ADHD doesn't mean I can't do it. It means I got to figure out how to do it my way.
Right. Great advice. Great. Thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate this.
Thanks, Kate.
And I'll put links to your website, and the book will be out late summer 2025. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. It's always fun talking with you.
You too.